I'm Phil. Thank you for tuning in. I want to try out this new series where I take one of my photos and I take it from nothing all the way up to a finished product. So let's check it out. Alright, so let's dive in. So you have this photo that I took of this bride a couple months ago, and I was at this golf resort. Really beautiful place. They had this really cool stairwell with all of this kind of ornamental decoration on the staircase. It was beautiful. So I never got a chance to do bridals with her, so we decided to do a couple bridals with her when we had some downtime. So this is a single light setup. Over here on the balcony, I've got a single light with a Magmod grid pointed right at her on one of my Canon 600 EX flashes. All of this down here, all of this shadow work is all done from the shadows of the staircase here. It was completely unintentional, but I loved how it turned out, so we kept it and we rolled with it. So this is what I captured in camera. All of this stuff is turned off right now. This is no editing at all. So this is what I ended up with. Bam. Can't tell me that's not a dope shot. So first things first. I always start with my exposure. I don't go crazy with it. If I underexpose it, I try to get the exposure right in the camera, and so should you. I leave contrast alone until the end. Then I'll go to my highlights, and if I'm a little bit underexposed or whatever, I'll bring some highlights in. But for this one, it was correctly exposed right out of the gate, so I left the highlights alone. Shadows. I love bringing a lot of shadows into my images. It gives you a bigger sense of the room. It gives you a really cool, it brings a lot of highlights into the hair. It's just a really good slider to always kind of play with, but you can go overboard with. Next, whites left alone because I correctly exposed it. And then the blacks. So you can really kind of go crazy either way you want. I don't like to go one way hard left or right when it comes to any of these exposures. Texture I left alone. I usually don't use a lot of texture when it comes to females because it can make wrinkles and skin pores and stuff like that really stand out too much, and a lot of women don't like that look. So I tend to leave it alone when photographing women. Clarity, I bump. I don't use too much. I mean, that's probably a little bit too much for what I tend to like, but it really brought the image together once everything was said and done. Dehaze, I didn't need that. Vibrance, I love where it's at. I just kind of bumped it to +2. Down here, I did a simple little S curve. That's without, that's with. So this is just the luminance curve right here. If you go over to my reds, left alone, greens left alone, blues left alone. I just use my luminance, and it brings out the shadows. It brings almost like a matte finish to your shadows, and that's something that I do in all of my photos. I take it and it gives it kind of like a texture to the photos, and I love it. I love how that turns out. Moving on. The Hue Saturation Luminance. I usually don't mess with these unless I need to correct something. If you add too much contrast to your image, it'll start to turn a little bit too orange. So you back the orange off in the saturation just to kind of give you that little bit of correction. I'll come back to my split tonings because that's where the magic happens. So your sharpening, every image needs sharpening. I don't care how sharp your image is, just sharpen it up just a little bit. Down here you have this masking tool. If you hit Option or Control, and you can kind of define what you want to sharpen, and then you bring the amount up as well as how much you want to sharpen. Then I didn't have any noise reduction because I shot this at ISO 400, and I usually don't do any noise reduction until I get upwards of 1600 plus ISO. So moving on. Always do use lens correction, because without it, it can add some vignetting in there, it can add some distortion, from wider angle lenses, just always go ahead and click them on. And I always finish off with a little bit of the vignette. Typically I don't do too much, but this image I felt like I really needed a lot, so you're focused all on her. And then I didn't do anything down here in the calibration. So going back to my split toning, this is where the magic happens. Without it, that's what you get. A very yellow, very orange, very warm tone. So I always, when I have an image that I want to get really moody, I use this kind of real light blue color. It's like a steel color, and I use that for my shadows. And then with my highlights, I bring back this skin tone, because that's generally the color of skin right here, right in there, orange. It doesn't matter what ethnicity you're from, this is about the same highlight level of skin tone. So without it, you can see the whole image is really blue. So you just add that warmth back into skin. It gives people's skin life again, and it really helps out. So once I did that, I come back to my contrast, and you can go like a lighter contrast if you wanted to, really soften it up. But I felt like this was a very moody image, and I love how this turned out. I set my my white balance in camera always, and this is it, man. This is how I achieved this image. So I had a flash off camera, and it was pointing down at her at a 45-degree angle, and created all of these shadows, and it looks really dope, and I love how it turned out. I'm going to be doing a class later on flashes and how to get like the correct exposure, how to get kind of artsy with some of your images, but for this one, this is how I got that image. I hope you liked it, and I hope to see you next time. Later, guys.